On July 10th, the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office announced Matthew Mollicone's sentencing guidelines: 86 months to 15 years for voluntary manslaughter, 12 to 40 years for assault with intent to murder, and 2 years for each of 3 counts of felony firearm. His crime? The brutal death of his wife, Kimberly Mollicone. The jury had delivered its verdict back in May. But for Kimberly's family, friends, and the tight-knit suburban community of Shelby Township, the sentencing was just a formality. The damage had already been done. The woman they loved was dead, shot and left to die in her own home. And the man who pulled the trigger wasn't a stranger. He was the man who'd vowed to love and protect her. This wasn't just another domestic homicide. This was a time bomb that had been ticking behind closed doors. In a neighborhood where the lawns were manicured, the neighbors waved politely, and the truth stayed buried until it exploded. The 911 call came in just after 2 a.m. on a bitter January night in 2023. The dispatcher's voice was calm, but what came through the line was chaos. Muffled screaming, followed by a man's voice shouting something incoherent. And then, "She's been shot. My wife's been shot." When deputies from the Macomb County Sheriff's Office arrived at the 2-story colonial home on Thornberry Drive, they found Kimberly Mollicone on the kitchen floor, bleeding from a gunshot wound to the chest. She was alive but barely. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead less than an hour later. Matthew Mollicone was standing by the front door, shirtless and shaking, his hands covered in blood. He told police it was an accident, a fight gone wrong, a gun that went off when it shouldn't have. But there was something off, something in his tone, the details that didn't line up, the fresh bruises on Kimberly's arms, the terror frozen on her face in death. An accident wasn't going to cut it. Kimberly Marie Mollicone was 37 years old. She was a mother, a nurse, and, by all accounts, the kind of woman who brought warmth into every room she entered. Her friends described her as strong-willed, fiercely loyal, and deeply compassionate, especially when it came to her 2 children, a 12-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter. "She had this way of making you feel seen," said her friend Alyssa Kramer. "She wasn't just nice. She was real. She showed up for people." Kim had grown up in Sterling Heights, graduated nursing school at the top of her class, and met Matthew when they were both in their early 20s. He was charming, attentive, ambitious. They married after just 11 months of dating. "She thought she'd found her forever," said her sister, Rachel Burke. But forever turned out to be a dangerous promise. Behind the white picket fence and staged holiday photos, the Mollicones' marriage was quietly unraveling. Friends say things changed after the birth of their second child. Matthew became controlling. He started tracking her phone, checking her messages. He got angry when she stayed late at work or spent time with friends. He isolated her, Rachel said. He'd say things like, "They don't care about you like I do," or, "You're being a bad mom when you're not home." It was emotional manipulation, and eventually it turned physical. Police records later revealed 2 calls to the Mollicone residence over the years, both listed as domestic disturbance, with no arrests made. One was in 2019, the other in 2021. Kimberly had told officers it was a misunderstanding and refused to press charges. She was scared, Rachel said. He'd convinced her that if she left, she'd lose the kids, the house, everything. So she stayed, like so many women do. The story Matthew told police that night was simple. They argued, Kimberly came at him, he reached for his gun out of fear, and it accidentally went off. But investigators weren't buying it. For one, Kimberly was shot at close range, straight in the chest, a deliberate shot, not a defensive one. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence she'd been armed. And then there were the 3 other bullet holes in the kitchen cabinets and floor. "He fired more than once," said Prosecutor John Daly. "He wasn't trying to scare her. He was trying to end her." Forensics confirmed that Matthew had fired a total of 4 rounds from a 9mm Glock registered in his name. 3 missed. 1 did not. And perhaps most chilling of all, security footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera picked up faint audio from the scene. What sounded like Kimberly screaming, "Don't do this! The kids, please!" just seconds before the shots were fired. When the case went to trial in early May 2025, the prosecution painted a chilling portrait of a man who saw his wife not as a partner, but as property. They showed texts from Matthew's phone threatening Kimberly, including one that read, "If you ever leave me, you'll regret it." They introduced testimony from a coworker who said Kimberly had confided in her weeks before the shooting, saying, "If anything happens to me, it'll be Matt." The defense tried to frame the shooting as a heat-of-the-moment tragedy. They argued Matthew never intended to kill his wife, that he was under stress, and that Kimberly had been volatile. But the jury didn't buy it. After 6 days of testimony and just 5 hours of deliberation, they found him guilty of voluntary manslaughter, assault with intent to murder, and 3 counts of felony firearm. Sentencing. On July 10th, Judge Kimberly Warner delivered the sentence. She called the crime a devastating act of violence rooted in control, jealousy, and rage. She addressed Matthew directly, saying, "You didn't just take a life. You tore a mother from her children, a sister from her family, a light from this world. And you did it in a place that should have been safest for her, her home." Matthew showed no visible emotion as the sentence was read. 86 months to 15 years for manslaughter, 12 to 40 years for assault with intent to murder, and 2 years per firearm count, served consecutively. Outside the courthouse, Kimberly's sister Rachel spoke to reporters through tears. "This wasn't justice. There is no justice when a woman dies like this. But it's accountability, and that's a start." Kimberly's murder shook Macomb County. It wasn't just that she was well known, or that her children were left motherless. It was the familiarity of it. The silence before the storm. The ways neighbors wondered afterward, "Did I miss the signs? Could I have said something? Done something?" "We see domestic violence as something that happens to other people," said Detective Lisa Brennan, who led the investigation. "But it happens here in our communities behind walls that look just like ours." Kimberly's death sparked local activism, including a candlelight vigil held in Shelby Township where more than 300 people showed up to honor her life and demand change. A local nonprofit began offering free legal consultations for women in abusive relationships. A petition was started to toughen sentencing laws in domestic violence cases resulting in death. The ripple effect was undeniable. But for those closest to Kimberly, no amount of awareness could fill the void she left behind. The children. Perhaps the most haunting aftermath is the one too painful to fully articulate. The effect on Kimberly's children. They were home the night of the shooting, sleeping upstairs, woken by the sound of gunfire. According to a victim impact statement read during sentencing, the children now live with their maternal grandparents. They're in therapy. They ask about their mother. They ask why their father did it. There are no easy answers. "They lost both parents that night," Rachel said. "One to death, the other to a prison sentence. All because he couldn't let go." Statistically, the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is when the victim tries to leave. It's a pattern domestic violence experts know all too well, and Kimberly was preparing to leave. In the weeks before her death, she had quietly met with a divorce attorney. She had started moving money into a private account. She was planning her escape. She was almost free, her friend Alyssa said. And that's what makes it even harder. He knew she was getting out, and he made sure she never would. Kimberly Malicone's story is not just about how she died. It's about who she was and how she tried to survive. It's a story about silence, fear, and control, but also about courage, love, and the small acts of resistance that come from refusing to disappear. Her friends remember her laughter. Her children remember her hugs. Her family remembers her strength. And now a county remembers her name, not just as a victim, but as a woman who mattered.